So I am about to add interactivity to this component. And you may notice that my file looks a little bit different. I'm going to be completely honest. I went through this entire lesson and only several days after the end of the lesson did I realize that I'd used two enable nodes instead of an enable and a disable. So I'm going back and rebuilding several things, and it's a lovely reminder for me that programming, even visual programming like this, is full of troubleshooting and just lots of fun. So bear with me, and as we go through this addition of interactivity with the player, just remember that this is the third or fourth time that I've built this. So it's okay if you also struggle with some of these concepts. Everybody does. What I want to do is I want to enable some kind of interactivity with the controller. And, right now, what this box is doing is it's allowing the player controller to enter and exit. And that's all it's doing. While the player controller is in the box, what I want is to also have inputs enabled, so the keyboard input, as an example. For that, all I'm going to do is come here, pull off my little noodle, and place a new node. Here I am going to enable input. So I just type in enable, there's enable input, and just like with the delay that I did a few lessons ago, you'll see that it pops into the graph right in the right place between the box collider and the visibility toggle, which is pretty neat. It means I'd never have to reroute the graph at all. But if I look at the input enable node, I see that it's got two things. It's got this target, which is set to self, that's fine, and it's got this player controller. The player controller node is looking for an input. If you look down here at the visibility target toggle, you see it's got this target. The target has a blue dot. The blue dot is filled in. It's getting information from this node. So the player controller node here also needs to be getting information from something. I'm going to click on its little dot and pull it off. When I pull it off, you see that I have a very limited assortment of things to choose from. So if I click Open Game, I can create a new player controller every time somebody walks in here. Not cool. I can just get player controller. You could also get a player controller from ID if you were doing multiplayer things. This would allow you to source different player IDs, but we're not that fancy. We're just going to get a regular player controller. There's only one in the game. This shouldn't be complicated. So there we are. We are now getting a player controller. The player index is set to 0. 0 is the first value, so that is the player controller of the game. So now, whenever my player controller enters this box, inputs will become enabled, and this help tip will show up. I want the opposite to happen when the player leaves. I want the help to be disabled. So I will pull off of here and type in disable. There's my disable input. It's almost identical to the enable input, but it says disable. I'm going to take this player controller and attach it to the player controller here, so I can just reuse this node. It's the same player controller, nothing fancy is going to happen. So now this trigger box will enable input and show the visibility of my help tip. And whenever the player leaves, the visibility will shut off and the inputs will be disabled. So the input that we're going to use, if you look at the help tip, it says press F, right? Press F to toggle light. So here, what I want to do is set up the visibility toggle to the F key on my keyboard. I'm just going to right-click to pull up the Help menu, and I'll type in keyboard, and that gives me all of the possible keyboard events. The one that I'm looking for is F, so I will scroll on down until I find F. There it is, and I'm going to connect pressed to toggle visibility. That ought to do it. I'm going to compile. I should be good to go, and now when I move this out of the way and I go to play, I can come in here, walk into my box. There's press F to toggle light. When I press F, the light turns on or off. I'll leave it turned on. I will leave the box, and now when I press F, nothing happens to the light. I've got another instance of my blueprint over here, so I'll go in there, press F, the light turns on, the light turns off, and when I leave, again, nothing happens. Perfection. So that is exactly what I wanted this blueprint to do. When I go into the box collider, inputs are enabled, and that F key will work, and the help tip turns on. When I leave the box, inputs are disabled, and the help tip turns off. So I hope that that went very smoothly for you. I'm feeling good about it. This is the entire blueprint that I was going to make. In the next lesson, I will come into this construction script and I'll show you how to make some public variables so that you can do things like change your light color for each increment of the blueprint. So good times. I will pause here and come back soon.